Hello! Welcome back to Irrelevant Topics. Today you're covering a very, very cool, scandalous, controversial story. It's really weird story. There's a lot of possibilities to what happened for your imagination to think of what you happened.
The Sodder kids.
Yeah.
Sodder children disappearance all the way back in 1945, Christmas Eve.
Yeah, very, so you can explain the background if you want, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. Maybe.
Well, it was the Sodder kids. The Sodder family was obviously two parents, and then they had 10 children.
A lot of children, by the way.
One had moved away, so there were 9 children still living in the house. And so I guess the Sodder father, George Sodder, was an Italian immigrant who had moved there, and then still had some connections to Sicilian mafia. Not that he was part of the mafia, but he was very critical of, I guess, the Italian president at the time, and very vocal
Mussolini.
about it. Mussolini, right? So that's some sort of weird connection to his, previous country, into something mafioso, I guess, right? So anyway, then there was a fire on Christmas Eve, and the house burned to the ground. However, 5 of the children have been missing ever since. So, yeah, 5. It was Louis, the 3 young girls, Louis, and Martha, Jeannie, Betty, Louis, and Maurice. So they were disappeared. And the part that's made this such a famous story, and it took place in West Virginia, by the way. What's such a famous unsolved mystery is that they say or that their kids perished in the fire. They burned. The fire, the house burned to the ground, and the kids just burned to death, and their bodies were burned beyond any kind of trace, right?
Yeah, because 2 the parents and then 4 the other children escaped. They made it out.
5, 6, 7, 8.
Because the 4 one wasn't there.
Yeah, the 4. Yeah. So anyway, the thing is what the reason is because those kids all slept on the top floor, like in the attic of the house, right? All the youngest kids slept together in the attic, and so they felt that they weren't able. The flames had reached that they weren't able to escape. But here's where it gets really kind of creepy, and why it's such an unsolved mystery.
Yeah, it's because when the fire burnt down and they were looking in like the rubble and the ash, they couldn't find any human bones.
No.
And human bones
They found no remains at all.
Yeah, it's
to show that anybody had burned in the fire.
Yeah, with the fire, it only burned down a couple hours ago, that I don't believe it could have been hot enough. Like, they didn't believe the fire wasn't hot enough for the bones to burn down, to burn to ash. The bones still should have been there when the fire burned the house. And especially it was a weird case because in the fire and like the rubble afterwards, there were still like some kitchen appliances that weren't even fully burned. Like they were only partially burned. There's still like parts left.
Through human bone.
Yeah, it seems a little bit fishy and weird why that happened. And George Sodder, the father, said to the police after that, when the fire started, they tried getting a ladder to go up to the roof to get the kids, which they couldn't find their ladder mysteriously. This ladder wasn't there. And the place that's always they have it wasn't there.
On that note, though, later they found the ladder thrown 75 meters away, thrown into a ditch.
Yeah.
So somebody had deliberately taken the ladder away. Yeah.
So, very suspicious. And, I guess they, screamed up to the kids and got no answer. Weirdly, they kept screaming, hey, the fire, the smoke. No answer. And you would think that they would, smell the smoke. At least there's 5 kids there. One should at least smell the smoke or hear parents screaming. So, very weird case. So that,
To me, I mean, and there's a lot of potential suspects. So if you really dig deep into the story, there's a lot of potential suspects as far as who would kidnap the kids. But I believe that's what happened. I believe the kids were kidnapped
Yeah.
And they did not perish in the fire. They were kidnapped from the house before the fire was set. And I think the fire was set to sort of cover up the kidnapping.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a whole variety of different
and there's so
people.
many details that lead to that.
Yeah,
this story has so many
I think the father, but the suspects came up because the father kept in thinking. I guess they of course asked the father who potentially would do this, right?
Yeah.
So he's coming up with all his own theories of the people that he's interacted with and sort of sketchy interactions he's had, and that's where they sort of fall. They research each one of those leads, but they're all to me a little bit of a stretch. I mean, I don't know, possibly. And then there's even the link to the Mussolini where they're kidnapping his kids and
the mafia too. Yeah.
So
should we talk about
agent?
Should we talk about the main suspect? That it's like,
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so a couple of months ago or previously, there was an assurance agent that came to their house and was trying to offer them insurance, and the family said, the father said, no, we don't want any. And the insurance agent said that your house will burn down and your children will be dead. Something to that effect. Right. And he said that not in regards to him saying no to buying like life insurance, but because of his beliefs against Mussolini that he didn't like. He had he was very opposed to Mussolini's views, and that's why this insurance agent was like, your house is going to burn down, your children will die. Yeah, or disappear somewhere.
Yeah.
So, and that pretty much, to me, sounds like it was him, because it could be a coincidence, a very weird coincidence, that he predicted what happened.
However, you have to consider the source, because it's the father who told them about that conversation, right? Right? That's how they know about
also, the insurance agent was a part of the jury for the trial, for the case. Right. He was a part of the jury,
he may not have said something that dramatic. I have a feeling the father was involved somehow with that.
Yeah.
And there's no theories about that. Like, I can't find anything that's pointing towards that. It doesn't talk about him being questioned at all or anything. But it just seems like, you can't find any information about their financial situation. Having 10 kids is very expensive.
Yeah.
And he said he had his own successful trucking business.
Yeah.
Maybe contracting and trucking business, but how successful, right? To raise 10 kids, right? Yes, one of them was gone, 9 kids. And the fact that I'm thinking 5 of them were sleeping in the attic, it's not very comfortable.
Yeah, right? But when you have that many kids...
back in the day, kids still would sleep in the same room together, and that was sort of... And people slept in smaller houses. But I'm thinking they probably struggled a little bit. If the 5 of them are sleeping in the attic, right? And it doesn't talk about the financial situation of the family or anything, but I'm thinking that. And then also, and in some of the research that I've done, it talked about how that night, all the kids stayed up late. Right.
It was Christmas
Eve. The 5
Eve.
kids. The 5 kids.
They got gifts.
The 5 kids that disappeared stayed up later than all the older people, including the parents.
Yeah.
So the 5 youngest were downstairs playing with the new toys, who the older sister had purchased for them. So, and they were so excited. From what I understand, the reason they were up was because the older sister had purchased these gifts for the younger kids.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, again, it leads me to believe that their financial situation was probably not that great if this older sister is saving her money from her part-time job to buy presents for the kids. It sounds like they probably were going to get any, so they probably were a little bit struggling a little bit. So
you think it was something to do with the dad,
the family?
You think
maybe even the mom? I don't know. The father was kind of, I don't know. He sort of somehow was involved with having those kids kidnapped or removed or sold or sent back to Italy or just taken away and given to other families, or somehow it was internally done to where they easily took the kids.
Yeah, so...
Because they clearly weren't in the house. To me, they clearly were not in the house and did not burn.
So, I think we should talk about a little bit talk about the details that kind of explain that, like, why the kids, why they probably were kidnapped. They definitely did not burn in the fire. We'll talk about some, like, kind of evidence backing that up. So, the first detail is that the mom woke up in the middle of the night to a phone call. Someone called her with a voice like she didn't know this person at all, and she heard like just like loud noises in the back and like glasses like hitting each other. So she thought, oh, it's like party somewhere, like a prank call. And then she got off the phone and saw that the curtains were still open.
Like everything was still open. The curtains were still open.
And that's something that the two oldest of the five usually do before they go to bed. When they stay up later than everybody else, they usually close the curtains and turn off the lights or whatever. But they were still on. The curtains were still open. So that's
and there was
weird.
no kids around. She thought the kids had all got to bed and just left everything open.
Yeah.
Which the kids were probably gone by then.
Yeah, and then another suspicious act is that when they were trying to move during the fire, when like the dad was trying to move his like trucks to like jump up onto the roof, he's trying to move them around to go on the trucks or something, they weren't working. Somehow the engines were not starting somehow when they were starting and working perfectly fine the day before. So that's suspicious. And then during the fire, another detail is when they tried calling the fire department, their phone line wasn't working. And they thought, oh, it's because the power was out or something. But it turns out after the fire, they found out that their power line was cut. Mm-hmm. It was cut somehow. And then as we covered earlier, the ladder that they have always in the same place was found 75 feet away, thrown in a ditch. So all these like different details are kind of evidence that this is not an accident somehow. I mean,
somebody, I forget who it was, I'd have to look at it again, but somebody claims they saw a stranger in a vehicle kind of following the Sodder kids a few days prior. Yeah. So, I don't know who that came from, if that came sort of from the father or somehow, or from someone. So, it sounds like they were kidnapped, and maybe it was from a total stranger or people who were stalking the family or looking at the family and thinking, hey, you know what, there's a lot of kids here and they can't really afford it, so let's kind of eliminate some of them. Mm-hmm. So they were watching the family, and then that was the night that someone had been watching that family, and that night they've been watching them through the windows, because she said the curtains are open, and saw, hey, all the parents are upstairs, everyone's asleep, it's late at night, it's 1 a.m, or probably 12 midnight. Yeah, the kids are still up, let's go in and get them. Yeah. So, but you think if a complete stranger's knocking on the door, comes to the door, how are they going to round up 5 kids and get them out of there? Hey, hi, we're here. It's 12 o'clock in the morning. We're at the door. Like, come on with us. It almost has to be like someone they knew, right?
Yeah, it's
like
weird.
Someone they knew kind of said, like, for example, the father said, hey, rounded up all the kids and said, hey, we're going to go with so-and-so. Come on, we're going to go for a ride, and got all the kids together, go while mom and other one slept. Or it was like someone the father knew that they had introduced them to previously, so they didn't feel, so they felt comfortable. Someone they felt comfortable with. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, really? You're going to take us for a ride? Or, oh, we're going to go get, so all the kids just voluntarily went with somebody without causing a fuss. So if there's a stranger at the door trying to kidnap them, even with a gun.
It's hard to kidnap 5 kids.
5 kids. Like, even if they had a gun on them, someone's going to say something, someone's going to scream, someone's going to try to run.
I know, like, it's easy to kidnap one kid without them.
You can't have 5 guns. You have one kid's going to try to run, and it's going to be too much of a ruckus.
I mean, you could kidnap one kid by himself, like, before they scream. It would have to be... But you can't kidnap 5 kids at one time.
It would have to be some sort of...
Like, not one would scream at least, 5 of them.
Or unless the person somehow endeared themselves to the kids somehow. Maybe it was a teacher at their school.
But they seem smarter than that, though. I mean, they seem...
Yeah, and they weren't that young. A couple of them were a little bit older, right?
Like 14 or something.
Maurice was 14, and Louis, the one that they sent a picture of later, was 9. So they weren't like... Yeah, and Martha was 12. So the 12 and 14, you sort of know what's going on, right? You know that you shouldn't run out the door with a complete stranger. So, yeah, no, it's super mysterious.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's all these, like, points that show that they were kidnapped, but there's also some weird, like, holes. Yeah. Some, like, holes in the story that, like, it's really hard I feel, to kidnap 5 kids. Mm-hmm. I mean, even if you have, like, let's say a whole mafia there, like, 5 people or like 6 people there kidnap these kids. You open the door and they're all there. One's gonna scream, and someone's gonna hear it. So it's really weird to think, how were they kidnapped? Mm-hmm. Or they really could have been sleeping and they were really kidnapped during the fire. Yeah. But then why was like, I mean, it could have just been that they just happened to leave the curtains open that day. But I feel like with older stories like this, all these different sources and stuff, it may or may not be true. Mm-hmm. Like, it's like, we're like basing our evidence on this when it could, or like it may or may not be real.
Yeah.
So it's,
but if the kids are kidnapped too, I mean, then there's like, where do they go? Like,
yeah.
Why would someone just kidnap 5 kids and murder them? I don't think. I mean, it was almost like they kidnapped them and either kind of put them in foster care or put them up for adoption or sent them back to Italy or took them out of the country.
Well, yeah, and then also
that they wouldn't appear after all these years of searching for them. You know, especially when the 14 and 12-year-old kind of, they have knowledge of their parents and their family and they remember, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you remember what happens to you at 14 and 12. Right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, you do. I mean, it's definitely, it's weird. Just the story's odd. Well, like there's so many different
options.
Yeah.
Different possibilities and
happened.
different scenarios. Yeah.
And then I guess, you know, the police later on blamed the fire happening on faulty
wiring, but the father said that he had just had the wiring checked and the wiring was not faulty.
Very recently.
Right? So
very weird case.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what happened. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I told you. I think they were kidnapped. I just don't know how, and I believe it was probably somehow an inside job. Either someone that they knew, someone had been watching that house every night for their opportunity and finally got it, and maybe the father was involved, maybe he wasn't. But it was they were definitely kidnapped by someone who they were familiar enough with that they would voluntarily go with them in the middle of the night.
But do you think they actually could have burned during the fire? You think it's a possibility?
No, it's not. It's not. I mean, they would have heard the kid. I mean, if there were kids up, they would have heard them screaming. There was no sounds, no nothing. Like they would have heard some sort of sounds of kids, and as they, you know, I mean, if they died right away from smoke inhalation, then there would be some sort of trace of them, right? Even if the house burned to the ground, they're still. They say that it was not hot enough, long enough to incinerate all evidence of human bones, especially
people, and then later on,
so there's no way they were in that fire.
Yeah, the parents have like gotten tips that their kids are still alive. Like they received a photo one time of what they think was
photo of Louis.
You know, like he was 30 in the picture. That man was 30. What they thought looked like him, but I mean, last time they saw a kid, he was 9.
Mm-hmm. So
and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's my kid."
That's a big difference, yeah.
And there was other there
was a name on someone had written the name Louis Sodder on the back. It's
yeah,
creepy.
Yeah.
If you want to see the picture, maybe we'll post the picture of Louis.
Yeah, we'll have it down in the description for sure. We'll put that in there.
It's super creepy that they would feel like it looked like him and they would have his name on the back.
Yeah,
that was sent to her in the mail with their brother's name.
Well, it wasn't. It was
mailed to her. It was mailed to her.
The mother or the mother's sister, I thought.
I think it was mailed to the mother.
And then there's like other...
Yeah, and you know, if anyone's going to recognize their child, you can kind of have an idea of what your child will look like. Since the last time we saw them was 9, they still sort of a similar look.
Well, apparently too, when Louis was 9, he had the same slightly raised left eyebrow as the guy in the picture.
Yeah,
and like a nose that's like
very prominent. And again, to have his name on the back and resemble him is super creepy and weird.
It is weird. And then
if I was the mother, it would freak me out.
Yeah. And then people saw, I guess that same night they claimed that they saw 5 kids getting into a car around town in the car, or even like the next day, a lady was interviewed, a waitress, saying that she served 2 men and 2 women and 5 kids at breakfast the next morning.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that.
I think we read that somewhere.
Oh, I'll have to look into that. Yeah, there you go. There proves my theory, right?
So, very, so many different options and clues to what happened. So, do you have, what's your thoughts?
I mean, who knows?